Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 88 based on novel. So let's start. In the sparring arena, there was a fight going on. The two parties involved were Jing Xian and Shu Sanxia. Shu Sanxia was standing in the center of the sparring arena. He flipped the shield of the Xuanwu turtle into the air, which resisted Jing Xian's attack. No matter how magical Jing Xian's fog was, she couldn't force him from his spot. Hu Yuhao slapped his hand to his forehead and said, "They really can't take a break. It's so early in the morning, but they are already fighting." Bei Bei smiled. "This is a good thing. It's a form of motivation for everyone. If you don't want to lose, you'll have to work hard. Am I wrong?" Those who were watching the fight weren't just the ordinary disciples. Wang Dong'er and Ji Juechen were present, too. Ji Juechen was watching the fight quietly, the judgment sword behind his back. He was still using his original sheath for it, which looked slightly unsuitable. Bei Bei and Hu Yuhao walked over. Ji Juechen looked at Hu Yuhao, and his eyes brightened. However, Hu Yuhao immediately said before he even opened his mouth, "Don't find me for anything. I didn't sleep last night. I was discussing soul tools with teacher Xian. My mind isn't in the right state now, and my fighting strength is at a low point. Even if you defeat me in this state, I don't think it's honorable for you, right? How's my third senior?" Ji Juechen replied without any hesitation, "Impressive. Shu Sanxia and Jing Xian both had 6 rings. As an agility-type soul master, she didn't stand a chance against the defense-type Shu Sanxia. The sparring had been going on for more than 10 minutes already. Shu Sanxia hadn't moved a single inch, and only defended against Jing Xian's attacks. If this continued, Jing Xian's smoke power was bound to run out. Ji Juechen appeared to be in good spirits, a passionate gaze in his eyes at this moment. After coming to Shrek City, he became more and more satisfied with his decision. If he had never come to Shrek City, he would never known how strong soul masters could become. They were at the same level, but Ji Juechen knew that Hu Yuhao's seniors weren't easy to deal with. Using Shu Sanxia as an example, he had no confidence of breaking through the black turtle defense using his sword intent. Furthermore, he could also tell that Shu Sanxia was holding back slightly. Of course, Jing Xian was holding back, too. But overall, Shu Sanxia still had an advantage over her. Hu Yuhao chuckled and replied, "Of course he's impressive. My eldest senior is also very impressive. He even mentioned that we should all help to improve one another in the future." Bei Bei glared at him. "Rascal, he sold me out the moment we arrived." He smiled before saying to Ji Juechen, "Brother Ji, your sheath isn't very suitable. I'll get the Soul Tool Hall to make you a new one when we return." Ji Juechen nodded and said, "Thanks. I would like to challenge you." Bei Bei knew that he couldn't escape. He naturally wouldn't shrink away from the challenge, either. Even though Ji Juechen had lost to Wang Chua yesterday, Bei Bei could tell how strong he was. With his sharp eyes, he could also tell that Wang Chua didn't win the fight easily, either. Just like Wang Chua had mentioned, the outcome might be completely different if Ji Juechen had changed his sword. "Alright, let's wait for them to finish fighting," Bei Bei agreed readily. He was also getting a little itchy. Shu Sanxia was very cooperative. As he stood in his spot, he shouted suddenly, "Sister Jing, I'm exhausted. Let's stop now, okay? It's not easy being your sandbag. Have you had your fill?" The purple fog consolidated and revealed Jing Xian's figure. She was panting heavily, and perspiration had already formed on her forehead. On the contrary, Shu Sanxia appeared to be very calm, and didn't look tired at all. Jing Xian snapped, "You are such a dishonest fellow. Why aren't you attacking?" Perhaps it was because Jiang Nannan was not present, and thus Shu Sanxia couldn't help but flirt a little when he saw a lady. "Hey, Sister Jing, how am I dishonest? People call me an honest, reliable guy. I'm holding a shield. How am I supposed to retaliate? I'm getting whacked so pitifully by you. I'm conceding defeat." Jing Xian rolled her eyes at him and retracted her martial soul. She said, "Alright, let's end it for today. I'll challenge you again when we return." Shu Sanxia chortled and replied, "Great. I'll be ready to fight you anytime." In fact, Jing Xian had put a lot of pressure on him. After sparring with Hu Yuhao, Ji Juechen wasn't the only who had improved. Jing Xian's martial soul was already very strange. Furthermore, her actual fighting abilities were getting stronger and stronger. Her attacks were quite incisive. Shu Sanxia only defended and didn't attack. It wasn't that he couldn't, but rather because he knew that he would give her an opportunity to exploit if he did so. In that way, it would be difficult to predict the victor. This was only sparring, and not a life-and-death battle. That's why he decided to defend all the way and created the stalemate. Jing Xian and Shu Sanxia stepped down. Ji Juechen drew his judgment sword. "Bei Bei, it's our turn." Bei Bei smiled and gestured for him to enter the arena first. The two of them walked towards the center of the arena. Shu Sanxia smiled, "Please be gentle. Don't destroy the place any further." Brother Ji, do your best. Destroy him. Jing Xian revealed a weird look in her eyes and asked confusedly, why are you cheering Juechen on, and not Bei Bei? Shu Sanche retracted his smile and appeared melancholic. I have an enmity with him, thus I can't cheer him on. I can't wait for Brother Ji to give him a good whacking. Jing Xian snapped, I don't understand the messy relationships between guys. Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga laughed as they stood at one side. Wang Donga said softly, Yuhao, go and rest. Didn't you stay awake the entire night? She knew that Hua Yuhao hadn't slept at all. Otherwise, he would have found her to cultivate together. However, she hadn't gone and disrupted him, either. She prepared breakfast for him at the canteen when she woke up. When Mo Xian came to find him earlier, Hua Yuhao had already consumed his breakfast. Hua Yuhao replied, I'll rest when this fight finishes, but you'll need to accompany me, alright? Wang Donga understood that he wanted to cultivate with her. However, someone objected immediately. Shu Sanche twisted his head and said in shock, Donga, you agreed. Wang Donga was stunned, and asked, why can't I agree? Shu Sanche appeared depressed as he said, why? The heavens, you are really unfair towards me. Not only was Jing Xian confused by his words, but even Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga were completely lost. They didn't know what he was doing. Jing Xian asked doubtfully, what's wrong? Shu Sanche was both sad and furious as he replied, we are both dating, but why is Nan Nan so cold towards me? Yuhao is younger than me, and he's not as developed as me. He's also not as handsome as me. However, Donga agreed to his advances in broad daylight. I'm pitiful. It's difficult for me to even hold Nanan's hand. Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga were instantly annoyed. Wang Donga said furiously, Third senior, your thinking is too dirty. I'm returning with Yuhao to cultivate later. We have twin martial souls, thus it's much easier for us if we cultivate together. Shu Sanche appeared as if he understood what she meant, and replied, I understand. Ah, the sun shines brightly outside while the two of you draw the curtains and lay under the blanket in the room. Why don't I have such a good life? Wang Donga wanted to explain further, but Hua Yuhao pulled her away. For such a matter, it would become more and more ambiguous the more they tried to explain themselves. Shu Sanche was obviously mocking them. The best thing to do was to ignore him. Jing Xian looked at Shu Sanche deeply, and didn't say anything. Shu Sanche was puzzled as he looked at the three of them, as he realized no one was bothering with him anymore. Hua Yuhao was holding Wang Donga's hand as he turned towards the arena. Only Jing Xian was watching him with a burning gaze in her eyes. Shu Sanche was confused as he asked, what are you looking at me for? Sister Jing, I'm already taken, even though I have to admit that you are pretty. No matter how harsh Nan Nan is towards me, my feelings for her are real. You've come too late. We can't be together in this lifetime. Let's see whether we are destined to be together in other lifetimes. Jing Xian sighed suddenly and gave a regretful look. She shook her head and turned her gaze towards the arena. Shu Sanche was stunned, and asked, why are you sighing? What's wrong with me? Do you think it's a pity that I already have a girlfriend? Jing Xian turned her attention towards him again and said seriously, when I sparred with you earlier, I still thought that you were quite strong, and that you have a bright future. However, I realized there's something wrong with a part of your body after everything that you've just said. As she spoke, she lifted her finger to point at Shu Sanche's forehead. Shu Sanche replied furiously, what's wrong with my brain? As his cultivation increased, the scales didn't just cover his arms anymore. The left side of his face was completely covered in scales, and his right arm ballooned in size. As the scales spread, they quickly engulfed his entire body. His shirt was almost torn apart as he grew in size. As electricity sparkled, Bei Bei seemed to be filled with boundless strength. He slowly lifted his right claw in front of his chest, and his eyes turned bluish-purple. As electricity revolved around his body, the space around him also started to distort. It became very difficult to tell where his actual position was. Ji Juechen's fighting style never changed. He grabbed the hilt of his judgment sword with both hands and slowly lifted it up. Initially, this sword was used by Ma Rulong against Ma Xiaodao during the tournament. Its power had activated Ma Xiaotao's evil fire completely, causing her to eventually be overcome. The results were tragic. Right now, the situation appeared to be different, as the judgment sword was in Ji Juechen's hands. The auras of darkness and light surged out from this sword at the same time. The sharp sword intent from Ji Juechen's body rose and combined with the aura of darkness and light. A strong sense of danger caused Hua Yuhao and the rest to turn serious. Hua Yuhao hadn't expected Ji Juechen to activate both the strength of darkness and light from the judgment sword at the same time. He didn't plan to use the skills that came with this judgment sword, but intended to combine the strength contained within the sword with his sword intent. Hua Yuhao had to admit that Ji Juechen was indeed a madman in terms of cultivation. The words madman and genius were usually synonyms. At least, that was the case for Ji Juechen. The sword radiance that shot into the sky was unpredictable. It extended more than 10 feet into the air, and was much stronger than Ji Juequan's original sword intent. This was the strength of a Class 8 soul tool. However, darkness and light were opposing forces. When they appeared at the same time, they were bound to conflict with each other. If one party gained the upper hand, it was bound to swallow the other party. The powers of darkness and light covered different sides of the Judgment Sword. To ensure the balance of the sword, the strengths of both forces were equal. At this point, they were activated by Ji Juequan and there was no conflict between them. However, it was more dangerous like that. The powers of darkness and light were about to cause an explosion. At this point, a layer of silver light shot out from the sword tip. It squeezed in between the powers of darkness and light, segregating both forces. The unstable sword intent a moment ago slowly started to stabilize. The sword radiance also started to turn golden, silver and black. The sword radiance changed into a tricolored blade in the air. Only one day had passed. Ji Juequan had actually understood the Judgment Sword to such an extent. Huo Yuhao hadn't expected this to happen. He had passed the Judgment Sword to Ji Juequan because he had thought that Ji Juequan was more suited for it. As for Huo Yuhao, using a Class 8 soul tool would greatly restrict his freedom, as he had various other abilities. Elder Mu had once told Huo Yuhao that the Judgment Sword wasn't ordinary. Although it was a Class 8 soul tool, its brilliance wasn't inferior to Class 9 soul tools. Otherwise, why would Jing Hongchen make a sudden trip to Shrek Academy to demand the sword back? At this moment, the Judgment Sword gave off a different feeling in Ji Juequan's hands. The pure sword intent segregated the forces of darkness and light. However, these two forces were attracted to it like it was a magnet. The two forces wanted to overwhelm the opposing force, but this only served to consolidate Ji Juequan's sword radiance. Ji Juequan was like a stone statue as he stood there quietly. Only the sword radiance was unleashed. At this instant, Bei Bei felt a great sense of danger. He knew that the might of that sword was going to be extremely great once it was unleashed. Solitary sword domain. When he had faced Wang Chua yesterday, Ji Juequan didn't use his strongest offensive ability, as he was unfamiliar with his opponent. Once he entered his domain state, his spirit, energy, and mind would fuse together. It was impossible for him to show any mercy then. That was why he had used his evolved Dragonslayer sword intent. However, Wang Chua had been much stronger than he had expected, and thus he suffered greatly at her hands. However, he wasn't going to hold back today. As the eldest senior of the sect, Bei Bei's abilities were immense. Ji Juequan had just received his Judgment Sword, and thus he was raring to go. He was giving his all the moment he appeared. The last time Huo Yuhao had faced this domain, Ji Juequan had needed Jing Xian to help protect him. That was because incubating the domain required time. But this time, he used the domain immediately, as if he wasn't afraid of being disrupted by his opponent. Bei Bei moved. Just as Ji Juequan settled into place, Bei Bei initiated his attack. Bei Bei's abilities had been increasing steadily over these past few years. His fighting will had been affected by Tang Yai's disappearance, and there were changes compared to the past. He had slowly infused his yearning for Tang Yai and his internal sorrow into his fighting strategy, complementing it with his soul skills. Although it didn't involve a fusion of spiritual and soul power as great as the Sovereign's descent, his own comprehension was getting better and better. He was slowly seeing the path that belonged to him alone. Bei Bei stomped on the ground with his right leg, and his body shot forward like a bolt of lightning. In the air, he waved his right hand in Ji Juequan's direction. His thunderous dragon claw enlarged in the air and swept towards Ji Juequan. Even though his dragon claw was formed using soul power and lightning, it still projected a vivid form in the air. When it was about to hit Ji Juequan, the size of the claw was just at the right size to envelop Ji Juequan completely. At this point, the electricity surrounding Bei Bei's body retracted. However, his scales turned bluish-purple. A bright bluish-purple light that undulated slightly emanated from beneath his feet. He also let out a deep dragon's roar. It was very easy to tell if one was strong. Although Bei Bei had only unleashed his first soul skill, his control and judgment left Jing Xian extremely impressed. Ji Juequan's solitary sword domain needed to have some accumulation before it could be unleashed. However, he had reached a level where he could unleash an attack without accumulating very long. Undoubtedly, his domain would be stronger if the accumulation was greater. Bei Bei sensed this threat, and thus he immediately made his move. If it were any other soul master, he might delay because of Ji Juequan's weirdness. But every second of delay would strengthen the solitary sword domain. With Ji Juequan's current cultivation, he could accumulate his strength for 15 seconds straight. Once these 15 seconds were over, he would have gathered his entire cultivation into one strike. After this strike, he would lose all fighting strength. However, even a titled Doluor would find it difficult to deal with such a strike. When Huo Yuhao had faced this domain in the past, Ji Juequan hadn't made it so extreme yet. After modification, he had carved out an extreme path for himself, and developed an extreme attack. He had turned all his strength into a single attack. He wanted an explosive strength that was lethal. Bei didn't give him the full 15 seconds. To be accurate, the thunderous dragon claw reached him after only 2 seconds had passed. The solitary sword domain was unleashed. The radiance on the judgment sword dimmed. The original tricolored sword radiance was covered by a dim layer of gray. As the sword radiance swept out, it converted into a streak of flowing light that dragged Ji Jueqin's body along. The thunderous dragon claw couldn't stop it from moving forward. In Bei's eyes, Ji Jueqin had disappeared at this moment. What was left was only a sword blade without any aura, shining with a tricolored glow. Shit, Bei cursed in his heart. It was his first time seeing such a sword intent. However, he was much more acute than others. When Ji Jueqin's sword swept out, he knew that he couldn't resist it head-on. However, it was impossible to dodge it when Ji Jueqin's sword was unleashed. It completely locked onto Bei. The sword radiance pursued Bei, so fast that it couldn't be avoided. At this time, Bei fully revealed his powers as the eldest brother of the Tang sect. His body, which had been charging forward, suddenly froze and became illusory. With his ghost shadow perplexing track, he suddenly moved to the side. Even though the sword light summoned by the sword fanatic was extremely fast, Bei's ghost shadow perplexing track had reached a new level. In an instant, the sword light flashed past him, and the move that should have struck him was slowed by a single beat. Within this small amount of time, Bei's eyes glowed with light. With a clear draconic roar, the 5 soul rings around his body shone with a brilliant radiance. His thick right arm swung out as he struck the sword light from behind. In an instant, the dragon scales all over Bei's body started to change. They turned a brilliant shade of gold, and each bolt of lightning brimmed with bright energy. He waved his right dragon claw, which disappeared into the sky. When it reappeared, there was a second golden dragon claw in the sky, which clashed head-on with the sharp sword light. Bei, however, took this time to quickly retreat. Crackle. It was as if lightning bolts from the 9 heavens had struck the earth. The brilliant golden light turned into countless sparks of electricity. Bei's golden dragon claw in the sky was unable to block the terrifying sword light, and was blasted apart. However, the speed of the sword light dropped rapidly, too. Following that, the countless rays of electric light that had been blown apart quickly congregated together, enveloping Ji Jueqin and displaying the might of thunder and electricity. While Ji Jueqin was using his domain, he was still a soul master, not a rock. The power of his domain was unable to resist Bei's attack. He paused, but his remaining sword intent exploded out in that instant, blocking the golden lightning around him. Good. Bei bellowed. While he had moved back earlier, he suddenly changed course again and charged forward once again. A golden halo suddenly shone from his body, and as it shone forth, his entire body was basked in a brilliant golden nimbus. No one could even see his body within the golden light as he charged toward Ji Jueqin mercilessly. Ji Jueqin did not show any sign of fear. He gripped his judgment sword tightly and swung it upward. The dragon-slaying sword intent quickly assembled, and another sharp sword light slashed toward Bei. His attacks were always so simple and straightforward. The ball of golden light that was Bei started to change too. It took the form of a huge dragon head, which was obviously his 4th soul skill, Thunderous Dragon Head. However, his Thunderous Dragon Head was different from before. Boom! A powerful explosion sounded, and a ball of golden lightning started to spread from the point of their clash. It extended outward for more than 30 meters, and in that area, the air was sizzling with electricity. Countless arcs of golden lightning crackled and buzzed. Some of them even started to resemble liquid, while some ball-shaped lightning clusters shook violently. Tyrannical Emperor's Thunderous Domain. This was Bei's powerful domain after he evolved his Radiant Holy Dragon. The electricity crackled for a few more seconds before it slowly died down. They could slowly make out the figures of Bei and Ji Jueqin. Bei had a new layer of purplish-blue dragon scales all over him. The golden light around his body quickly faded away, and around 7 to 8 meters in front of him, Ji Jueqin stood with his sword in hand. While his grip was still stable, his body trembled non-stop. The clothes on his body were more or less destroyed. The side which represented light still shone brightly on his judgment sword, giving off a thick, bright aura. A drop of blood trickled down from the corner of Ji Jueqin's mouth. However, there was no sign of pain on his face. All there was a look of deep contemplation. Bei nodded his head at Ji Jueqin and said, "Brother Ji, your sword intent is powerful indeed. What's the first move called?" Ji Jueqin appeared to have been jolted awake as he responded, "It's a domain I came up with. It's called the Solitary Domain. I lost." While he liked to fight, he knew when he had lost and when he had won. When Bei used his Thunderous Dragon Head and attacked with his Tyrannical Emperor's Thunderous Domain, he had used 7 moves rapidly. However, the power of these 7 moves was devoured by the powerful domain. Had Bei not shown mercy, there was no way he would still be alive. Bei Bei shook his head and said, "No, you did not lose. Instead, in terms of innovation, I've lost. Brother Ji, after you familiarize yourself with your judgment sword, it will be hard for me to defeat you. Your sword can limit my power." Regardless of whether it was Hu Yuhao, Shu Sanxia, or Wang Donga, they all knew that Bei Bei was not lying. While Ji Juechen had lost once more, his domain was able to directly force Bei Bei to use his most powerful Radiant Holy Dragon. If not, Bei Bei may not have been able to retreat intact from that attack. While Bei Bei had won, Ji Juechen's Judgment Sword had absorbed a large amount of light-type soul power from Bei Bei. Ji Juechen was still not very sure how could he use his soul tool sword. If he knew, even if Bei Bei had won, it would not have been so easy. Ji Juechen said, "Thank you for your guidance, I'll spend more thought on it." With that, he nodded at Bei Bei and turned to leave. He would not dilly-dally, this was not his style. Jing Xian rushed up to him and asked, "Juechen, are you injured?" Ji Juechen shook his head. When he looked at Jing Xian, a smile crossed his face. Then, he stopped and turned to look at Bei Bei, Shu Sanxia, Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga and said seriously, "Coming to the Tang sect is the best decision I've ever made. In the future, I'm afraid I'll continue to trouble you." As he said that, he bowed to everyone and then left, gripping his judgment sword tightly. Shu Sanxia looked at Ji Juechen's disappearing figure as he mumbled to himself, "Everyone says I'm crazy, but that guy is crazier than I am." In his eyes, nothing is more important than his sword. Bei Bei said, "That's why he is so scary. His choice is a special path. He specializes in one thing and one thing only, and that's his sword. He doesn't even add a single soul skill to it. However, because of this, he'll be able to reach a level none of us could in the future." Shu Sanxia said, slightly unimpressed, "So what? His way of cultivation is too inflexible. Furthermore, while he has a lot of explosive power, he can't maintain it for long. As long as we fight him by targeting his weaknesses, he can't display the full extent of his powers." Bei Bei laughed. "It's not easy to be the most powerful in any one area. Everyone has his or her own path, and we must respect his choice. Furthermore, don't you think that his presence can help us train?" Shu Sanxi's mouth twitched, and he said, "That's for you only. You were forced into a corner like a dog, and had to use your Radiant Holy Dragon. Shameful, shameful indeed." Bei Bei said unkindly, "You yourself said that his explosive power is strong. Had I not used the Radiant Holy Dragon, there was no way for me to beat him. Next time, you try to fight him after you've been targeted by his sword intent." Hu Yuhao said from the side, "Big Senior, Third Senior, I'll go and train with Wang Donga." Ji Juechen's love for the sword had moved Hu Yuhao greatly. He felt a sense of urgency, as Ji Juechen was improving too quickly. Hu Yuhao feared that if he did not improve as quickly, he would be left behind. An odd smile appeared on Shu Sanxi's face as he said, "Go, go, stay safe." Without waiting for him to finish, Bei Bei interrupted him, "Nothing good can come from his mouth. Yuhao, Donga, ignore him and go. Today, we aren't returning to the academy. Remember to come back for dinner." After they bade their Big Senior and Third Senior farewell, Hu Yuhao dragged Wang Donga back into their room. Wang Donga appeared deep in thought. Hu Yuhao took off his coat, sat down by the bed and said, "What are you thinking of, Donga?" Wang Donga replied, "What do you think of Ji Juechen, as well as Big Senior's and Third Senior's analysis?" Hu Yuhao said, "Both Big Senior and Third Senior are right. However, they don't understand him well enough. In reality, Ji Juechen's stamina is decent. However, when he faces powerful opponents, he likes to use his most powerful attack first. Hence, this affects Big Senior's analysis of him. If he changes his battling style, he'll still be just as powerful. However, his weakness is that he is not flexible enough. If we target his weaknesses, there are ways to beat him. For example, there's a trick to beat the domain he used just now." Wang Donga asked curiously, "What's that?" Hu Yuhao chuckled, "Think about it, if I run away the moment he uses his domain, what will happen? The moment he tries to use his domain, his entire body will enter a certain state. He has to lock in on an opponent and slowly accumulate energy. Looking at things today, it is clear that his opponent must attack him first. Only then can he use his domain. If his opponent doesn't attack, he will continue to accumulate energy and after a while, his power will be extremely strong. However, if I run away from the start, his domain power would be maximized. However, even after he accumulates all that energy, how powerful can his attack be? Let's not talk about anything else, but if I escape with a flying-type soul tool, I can clear 3 kilometers in 15 seconds. No matter how powerful his domain is, he can't attack someone 3 kilometers away." Wang Donga laughed, "Your plan is tricky indeed." When he heard what Wang Donga had said, Hu Yuhao was stunned. Then, his eyes lit up and he jumped up. He rushed toward Wang Donga and hugged her tightly as he spun her around. Wang Donga gasped in shock. She blushed as she tapped his shoulder and asked, "What are you doing?" Hu Yuhao put her down and said excitedly, The bystander has the best perspective. You are right. I am a control-type soul master, and his style of attacking is extremely offensive and even deadly. If we can work together, we can fight those who are above our level. I can complement his weakness, is that what you're saying? Wang Donga nodded. Huo Yuhao wrung his hands and said, I have always viewed him as an opponent, but I have never imagined that we could cooperate like this. With his sure-kill attack, we can even incorporate him into our team. He'll be in charge of delivering the killing blow while we can help to control our opponent from the start. With his solitary domain as our coup de grace, there are so many different ways to attack. For example, the moment he starts to accumulate energy, but before he has enough to release it, Third Senior can use his mysterious underworld displacement to transport our most powerful enemy over. Then, he can unleash his deadly attack. Hee. Wang Donga's pupils shone brightly as she said, right, this can work too. However, he is over age. If not, he could have joined us for this Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. Huo Yuhao smiled and said, this is fine, he's now part of the Tang sect. After all, a competition is just a competition. What is more important is the future of our Tang sect. Looking at it now, it isn't a bad thing for him and Jing Xian to tag along. Come, Donga, let's take the time to cultivate. You all are 6-ringed, and I need to get my 6th ring as fast as I can. With that, he took off his shoes and climbed onto his bed. He sat cross-legged and waited for Wang Donga to join him. Wang Donga's face turned sullen as she stood by the bed and asked, wait, I haven't had the chance to ask you something yet. Yesterday, why did Wang Chua look for you? How do you plan to split the soul bones with her after you return to the inner courtyard? Why do I feel that there's something off about the way she treats you? Huo Yuhao was stunned. He smiled bitterly and asked, what's wrong? Wang Donga snorted and said, we are both women, and I can tell that when she looks at others, her gaze is icy cold. However, when she looks at you, her gaze will become gentle. If you don't believe me, you can ask elder brother and the rest. They all noticed it too. I think Wang Chua likes you. Cough cough. Huo Yuhao put on an angelic expression and said with a smile, my dear Donga, don't you believe me? I only have you in my heart. Wang Donga snorted and said, I believe you. However, I still need to remind you. After all, she's so pretty, and after a while, you'll develop feelings for her. To prevent something like this from happening, you should avoid her as much as you can in the future. Give her the 3 soul bones so she won't have a reason to keep looking for you. Huo Yuhao said with a smile, why do I feel that you are cute when you get jealous? Furthermore, there's no reason for you to get jealous. Wang Donga's face turned red, and she tugged her ear as she said, who's the one getting jealous? Is there a reason for me to get jealous? I'm in the wrong, Huo Yuhao said with a bitter look on his face. Let's cultivate, if not, I'll sleep. Wang Donga snorted, and only then did she take off her shoes and climb onto the bed. After she sat down, she noticed that Huo Yuhao's ears were turning red. While keeping a poker face, she leaned over to give his ear a rub. Huo Yuhao chuckled bitterly. Trouble comes to find me. Wang Donga said, you have to promise me to interact with her less. Yes, I'll interact with her less, Huo Yuhao replied without hesitation. Are you lying to me? Wang Donga asked suspiciously. Huo Yuhao bellowed instantly, may heaven be my witness as I swear this to you from the bottom of my heart. If not, fine, I believe you. Wang Donga placed her hand over his mouth. Huo Yuhao instantly pulled her hand off and pulled her into his embrace. Having Wang Donga, with her light fragrance, in his arms was too comfortable. This even made his blood go wild. Huo Yuhao's promise to interact less with Wang Chua was genuine. How could he not know how special Wang Donga was to him? While he could not be certain that Wang Chua liked him, his heart was already full of Donga. Regardless of how similar the two of them were, they were still separate people. Huo Yuhao would never hurt his beloved Donga. Huo Yuhao said quietly, eh? Wang Donga replied. Huo Yuhao said, I suddenly feel that Third Senior is right. Today's weather is fine. Why don't we pull the curtains open and sleep for a while? Didn't you say that it's fine for us to relax too? I'll hug you to sleep, and I promise I won't touch anywhere I'm not supposed to. Alright, no. Wang Donga wriggled free from Huo Yuhao's embrace, blushing. She raised her hands and said, let's cultivate. While she was willing to lie in his embrace, they were not yet married. It was fine if they cultivated together in the day, but if they fell asleep together and were discovered, it would be very embarrassing. Furthermore, the last time they fell asleep together was because they were drowsy. She was still unwilling to sleep with Huo Yuhao. After all, she was just a 17-year-old girl. Her sense of restraint and shame was more than enough to let her rational side take over. Huo Yuhao looked at her face, which was both blushing and filled with determination, and was stunned. Donga, you are so pretty. Wang Donga did not give him any more chances as she said, cultivate. Look at you, your eyes are red. Alright, let's cultivate. Haplessly, Huo Yuhao raised his hands. Their palms came into contact with each other as they closed their eyes. The Haodong power flowed through both of them. Light-type soul energy entered them and started to flow like a great river. This energy made all the pores in Hua Yuhao's body open up. It was extremely comforting. He still felt the best next to Wang Donga. He could not help but think about the time when he fused his martial soul with Wang Chua. Perhaps that fusion could increase his powers to a greater extent, but Wang Chua's forceful cultivation would make their fused martial souls extremely violent. Not only would they injure their opponents, but they would also injure themselves. As their soul power flowed and the Haodong power kicked in, Hua Yuhao was able to catch some of the subtler changes. After the challenge of the Great Star Do Forest, his overall strength had increased, including his control over his soul power. As the pressure increased, a soul master would be motivated to improve too. A day passed by quickly, and the Tang sect became busier. Shen Ziwen's inclusion changed the dynamics of the sect. Under his guidance, the Soul Tool Hall was becoming more efficient. Of course, money was spent like water. While Shen Ziwen personally made many exquisite tools for making soul tools, materials were still required. Hua Yuhao had brought many types of precious metals back, but they lacked ordinary metals, which had to be bought. Shen Ziwen was the go-to guy for making soul tools. However, he was no master of economics. After a single day, Bei seemed extremely worn out and flustered. Even so, he tried to fulfill all of Shen Ziwen's requests. If the Tang sect wanted to continue bettering itself, the Soul Tool Hall had to get its act together. This was not the time to save money. To purchase enough materials, he had to borrow a lot of money from the main businesses of Shrek City. They would never doubt the honor of the Tang sect, as Bei also brought with him the guarantee from Shrek Academy. Hence, the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall was finally able to take off. According to Shen Ziwen's plan, the Soul Tool Hall's next step was expansion. Only by getting enough space could they continue to recruit people. Of course, they had to recruit experienced soul engineers. Only then could the Soul Tool Hall of the Tang sect really take off. As for this point, thanks to the communication between Bei and He Kai-tu, the path for Shen Ziwen to teach at Shrek Academy's Soul Tool department was cleared. While others might not know how powerful Shen Ziwen was, how could Fan Yu and He Kai-tu, both of whom had visited the illustrious Virtue Hall, not know? As a Class 8 soul engineer, Fan Yu was clear about the difference between Shen Ziwen and himself. If not for the fact that Shen Ziwen's cultivation was not yet at the level of a titled Doluor, he would have long since ascended to the level of a rank 9 soul engineer. For him to instruct the Soul Tool department was a privilege that money could not buy. Among them, Wang Chua, Dai Huabing, Ning Tian, Wu Feng and Xie Shenyu were inner courtyard disciples. The other 5 of them were outer courtyard disciples. Other than Zhu Lu, the other 4 of them were from Hua Yuhao's class. How could they not know each other? As he looked at them, they naturally looked back. Cao Jinxian, Zhu Siken, Lan Susu, and Lan Luoluo looked at Hua Yuhao rather normally. However, when their gazes fell on Wang Donga, they couldn't help but turn to look at Wang Chua. Their gazes flitted between the two of them, and expressions of shock crossed their faces. Some of them, including Cao Jinxian and Zhu Siken, even looked excited. No one knew what they were thinking. Bei brought everyone before the 3 elders and lined everyone up smartly before bowing. Elder Shen nodded and said, "Good, everyone is here. Let us begin." As he said that, his gaze fell onto Shrek's 7 monsters, and he said, "Yesterday, we received a formal notice from the organizing committee of the tournament that the rules of the tournament have been finalized and confirmed by all 4 countries on the continent. Hence, I can now tell you that the sects will take part in the new tournament. If you want to change your minds, this is your last chance." Bei turned to look at his comrades. Everyone had a look of resolve in their eyes. Bei turned back and said respectfully to Elder Shen, Dean Yang, Dean Cai, "We've decided that we are willing to represent the Tang sect in this tournament." Elder Shen nodded and said, "Good. Since you've decided, I wish you all the best. However, I must remind you that as you are representing the Tang sect, you won't receive any assistance in the tournament from the academy. Your substitutes can only be chosen from the Tang sect. You will be completely self-reliant, and your victory, or your loss, will have nothing to do with the academy." "Yes," the 7 of them replied in unison. Naturally, they understood that Elder Shen was not trying to absolve himself of responsibilities. Instead, he wanted them to enter the competition properly. Elder Shen said, "Next, I'll tell you about the specifics of the competition. Remember, this competition is unlike those that took place before it. As the tournament seeks to attract sects, there will be an explosive increase in the number of teams taking part. Hence, competition will be stiff. After research by the Sun Moon Empire, they decided to set the following rules. The new tournament will be named the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. As there are many teams taking part in it, there will be elimination rounds until only 32 teams are left. The top 32 teams will be divided into 4 groups. The top 2 teams from each group will enter the top 8. Then, the progression will be preliminary rounds, group matches and finally, the final match. All rounds will have individual elimination and group components. In each round, every participating team can send out 7 participants, and only 7. Once the name list has been confirmed, it cannot be changed. First, there'll be individual elimination rounds. The 2 opposing teams will each send a competitor. Once the competitor defeats their opponent, they will continue to fight until they lose, or the participant may choose to forego the match voluntarily. A victory will net you 1 point, and the winning team from the individual elimination round will be awarded 2 points. After the individual elimination round, we'll progress to the 7-on-7 group round. The participants will still be the 7 who took part in the individual elimination, with no rest in between. Even if a team has injured participants and cannot send 7 members, there will be no replacements. The winning team from the group round will earn 5 points. In the preliminary rounds, the team with the higher number of points will win. When they heard the rules of the competition, Shrek's 7 monsters fell into deep thought. Elder Shen continued, I believe that you have realized that in the new rules, what is important is individual prowess. The individual elimination round is extremely important. If you can win all the points from the individual elimination round, then you'll win the match without having to enter the group round. Hence, the order of deployment is extremely important. So you'll need to go back and do some research, and find what suits you best. Here, Elder Shen turned his gaze to the side, looking at Wang Chua and the rest, and said, standing before you are those who took part in the last Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. I can tell you that because of their exceptional performance then, they brought glory to the Academy, and were bestowed the title of Shrek's 7 Monsters. In this match, they will still participate, but not on behalf of the school. As for the 10 of you, you will represent the school as either members of the main team, or as substitutes. I hope you won't let the school down and obtain good results. Xiaozhe yes, answered Yang Xiaozhe. He took a step forward and said, the new team will be headed by Wang Chua. The main team members include Dai Huabing, Ning Tian, Zhu Lu, Wu Feng, Xie Shenyu, and Cao Jinshen. The replacement team members are Ju Sikhen, Lan Susu, and Lan Luo Luo. Due to the special nature of this competition, the school will not send lower-leveled participants, so as to give ourselves a fighting chance. Only then did Hua Yuhao and the rest know that the 10 of them who were called might not even have known why were they summoned. Indeed, after they heard Elder Shen's explanation, as well as Yang Xiaozhe's announcement, their faces all changed. Cao Jinshen, Ju Sikhen, and the Lan sisters were all excited. For them to represent Shrek Academy was an unimaginable honor. Even though it was because Shrek's 7 monsters could not take part, it was still an excellent opportunity that they should endeavor to seize. However, the others wore uglier expressions. As a student of the inner courtyard, Dai Huabing and Ning Tian had some news about it. From their perspective, they should naturally represent the academy. After all, they fell within the age range, and could be said to be the best among their peers. However, they had never expected the academy to pick a girl who resembled Wang Donga to be their captain. Among them, Dai Huabing and Ning Tian, both of whom were hoping to be captain, wore ugly expressions on their faces. Ning Tian's expression was not as bad, as she looked only slightly unnatural. Of course, this was also because of her relationship with Hua Yuhao and Wang Donga. Dai Huabing's face, however, was as black as a pot. He was never apt at concealing his emotions, and hence, he clenched his fists tightly. If there's no other matter, it shall be set as such. From today onward, all of you will undergo special training, said Yang Xiaozhe sir. Dai Huabing took a step forward. Yang Xiaozhe arched his eyebrows slightly as he looked at this talented, albeit hot-headed, student. Dai Huabing said, Dean Yang, may I ask what the criteria was for the selection of our new captain? Yang Xiaozhe smiled slightly and said, strength, of course. Wang Chua just joined the inner courtyard as a disciple this year, and she is an assault-type soul emperor. Among you, she is the strongest, and hence, she'll be your captain. Dai Huabing protested, rank doesn't represent everything. As he said that, he glanced over at Hua Yuhao. He was right. Hua Yuhao was proof of his point. He did not know how many times had he proven it to others. Yang Xiaozhe said coldly, go back to your spot. In front of the dean of the martial soul department, Dai Huabing did not dare to say anything else no matter how displeased he was. All he could do was fall back in line. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.